Now let us move forward to what functions are. So I'll create a new class for the functions. Okay. Functions are very important. Function, you can say a function is an independent small unit of execution. Out here you can see over here that this main is a function. This is the starting bracket of the main function, and this is the closing bracket of the main function, and this is the scope of the main function in which your code will reside over here inside this main function. Okay, so similarly we can have our own functions as well inside a class. Say suppose we have a function public static void test me. Okay, so now what is static, what is this void, what is this test me? Just have patience, you will get clear, it will get clear to you as we proceed with the course. Okay, this test me is the name of the function that we have just created. Okay, now if I write inside the main function console.writeLine in main, okay, and in the test me function I write in test me. Okay, and now when you run your code, I'll just write console.read key. Okay, and now when you run your code, it will okay, so there are two main functions. Now when we run our code, it will print only one statement, that is in main. It does not print in test me statement. We have printed this statement as well, but in the output in the console window it just printed in main. Okay, so functions are not executed as they are. It looks like that they will be executed, but actually they are not. Okay, and functions are inside the class body only. Inside the class body all the functions should be declared. Okay, and they should be parallel to each other. They should be parallel to each other inside the class. You cannot make a function inside another function. Say if we put the if I just put the test me function inside the main function, so you cannot put that, you will get an error. So make sure that the functions are parallel to each other. Okay, they are parallel to each other. You cannot declare a function inside another function, then you will get an error. So now if I want to print in test me as well, so what we need to do, we will have to call this test me function inside the main function, right? So since the main function is the one in which the control comes by default when your program runs for the first time, right? So for that what we need to do, we just call in this test me function in order to print the test me statement as well. We will just call in this test me function. Okay, and now when you run your code, so now you will see that it prints the test me statement as well as the main statement. Okay, because when the control comes to the main function, firstly it goes to the test me function, and inside this function we have printed the in test me statement, and then the control again comes back to the main function and then it prints the in main statement. Okay, and then it comes out. Okay, so you can call the function, this test me function, any number of times as well. you can call this function any number of time. So now when you run your code, so here you see that it prints this test me statement 3 times, since we have called in this test me function 3 times inside the main function. So you can call this, you can call any function any number of times. Okay, and the order in which the program executes is the serial order in the main function. Now over here we have called in this test me function. Firstly, we have at the first we have called in this test me function in the beginning. So it prints the, when you run your code, it prints the test me line first, and then it prints the in main function, in main statement. Okay, so the serial order would remain the same. Okay, and you can create any number of functions inside a class. Say suppose I create another function as public static void print name. Okay, and over here I may write as Selenium. Okay, and then we will just call in this function from the main function. Okay, and now when we run our code, so here you see that it prints the Selenium at the end, since we have called in this print name function at the end. So it prints the Selenium at the end, and the serial order, it remains the same. Firstly it prints the test me, then main, and then the Selenium. Okay, so this is very useful thing. First function is something which can execute itself again and again. Now suppose you've got 100 test cases and all of them require you to log in into your application. So instead of writing the whole code which will log you inside the application, you can write the code inside a single function and can call that function again and again from all the 100 test cases. Okay, so I'm just giving you an example how we do it practically. We'll see when we will be working with the Selenium. I'm just right now giving you an hypothetical example. Okay, so secondly, you can pass any values inside the function as well. For example, I'll create a new class, functions passed in values. Okay, now suppose firstly I'll just declare the main function over here. Okay, and I write console dot okay, so I was telling you that we can pass any values inside the function as well. Now suppose we make a new function as public static void sum all. Okay, sum all. So this now this sum all function, it would take 3 arguments of integer type, integer b, a, b and c. Okay, so what this function is doing, it is taking 3 parameters a, b and c, and then it will add these 3 numbers, add these 3 parameters that it is actually taking inside it. Okay, so inside this function we can simply write int sum is equal to a plus b plus c. Okay, and then you can simply call this function inside the main function, right? And when you are calling it inside the main function, since this function is taking 3 parameters, so inside this function you have to give in 3 values, 3 integer numbers that which it takes. Okay, so the first number will go inside the integer a, second number would go inside b, and the third number would go inside c, and then it will just add these 3 numbers and then it will just return you. So over here we can simply write the sum. Okay, so now when you run your code, okay, I'll just comment this main function. Now when you run your code, it says that it just added up the three numbers and gave you the output as 14. Okay, so this is the sum of the three numbers 2, 5 and 7. Similarly, we can call the sum all function any number of times with different set of data. Okay, you can call this function any number of time. Okay, and when you call this, when you run it, so it give you the output 3 times, since we have called in this function 3 times with different sets of data. Okay, so you can say that the function is like a factory in which you supply something and the output comes up according to the logic applied inside that factory. Okay, so the functions can be called any number of times, as I told you, and there can be any function in a class. Functions have to be parallel to each other. Okay, and number of arguments you supplied in a function have to be same with the number of arguments you passed on from the main function. Okay, now over here I cannot pass a string value over here inside the sum all function. It is because, so it is giving us the error that the best overloaded method match for the sum all function has some invalid arguments. Okay, I cannot pass a string value over here because I am saying that this function takes integer parameters. It takes 3 integer arguments. It does not take any string value, so it is showing us the error. Okay, so in order to print the string value, we will have to make another function sum all. We will have to make another function sum all that would take an string value. That would take a string value, right? Okay, so inside this, so when you will be calling this sum all function, it will actually be calling this sum all function which accepts one string variable and 2 integer variables. Okay, so when you run it, it would run accordingly. Okay, since we are not doing anything inside this sum all function which has the string parameter, so it doesn't just executed this sum all function. Okay, so it was just a small example that I just related with you. Okay, so now if suppose I declare one variable temp over here inside the sum all function. Now this temp variable, it is known as the local variable. It is known as the local variable. Local variable means that the life of this variable is inside this function only. It cannot be accessed outside this function. Okay, similarly this sum variable is also a local variable only. If you try to access this temp variable or the sum variable outside the function, if suppose I write sum over here, then you cannot execute this. It says that the name sum does not exist in the current context. Okay, so like I told you that this sum is the local variable. It can be accessed inside this function only and cannot be accessed outside this function. Similarly the temp variable also, it cannot be accessed outside this function. Okay, because the life of local variable means the life of that variable is inside that very function only in which it is declared. Okay, so similarly if suppose in the main function I declare one string variable as int country is equal to India, and if I try to access this country variable in the sum function, then you cannot simply do that. It says that this country variable does not exist in this context. Okay, so like I told you that this is an local variable. Okay, so local variables can be called inside the function in which they are declared. Outside those functions, they cannot be just accessed. Okay, so now moving to the next topic, function can also return back a variable or a value. It can also return back. Okay, for example, I call this sum all function. I am calling this sum of all function, and I want to check that whether the result is greater than 100 or not. And if it is greater than 100, then I want to print that the sum is greater than 100. Else it should print. Else if it is less than 100, it should print that the sum is less than 100. Okay, so for that, over here you see void. So now this void is the return type. Okay, this void is the return type. Function can accept any number of arguments. As I told you, function can accept any number of arguments, but a function can return only one value. If function want to return, it can return only one value. For example, I want the sum to be accessed inside the main function as well. Okay, when I call this function sum all function, I want that when the function should send me back the sum of all the three numbers, so that you can check that the sum is greater than 100 or not. So in that case, what we will do, we will change the void return type. Now void means nothing, means that it doesn't return anything. Okay, so in that case, if we want to return the sum of the three numbers and want to check that whether it is greater than 100 or not, we will change this void return type to int. Okay, we will change the void to int. That is, this function will now return us integer number. Okay, and then if you are returning any integer number, anything you are returning, then it is mandatory to write a return statement as well at the end in the function. Okay, it is mandatory to write the return statement, that is return sum. Okay, if you don't write this return statement, then you would get an error stating that the function sum all function, not all code paths return a value. Right, so now, and inside the main function, there you can catch it in another integer number, in another integer, say int s is equal to you can call this sum all function, can catch it inside another integer. So the value of this sum that you would be getting will go inside the variable s. Okay, and then you can check that whether the sum is greater than 100 or not. So you can say if s is greater than 100, then simply print greater than 100, and then you can concatenate it with the value of s. Else the sum is lesser than 100, and then concatenate it with the value of s. Okay, so now when you run your code, so here it says that the sum is lesser than 100 and the value is 86. Okay, so similarly we can make another function as well inside the inside this class. Say suppose I make another function as public static void find sum of the numbers, and over here I pass one integer number. Okay, so this find sum function, what will it do? It will say that whatever number you give to n, it will find the sum of that number from 1 till that number that you will be supplying over here. and then it will return you back as well. Okay, so since it should return me back the value of the sum as well, so we will just change the return type to integer. Okay, and over here we can write in sum is equal to 0, and then we can simply write a for loop less than equal to the number x and then x plus plus, and we can say sum is equal to sum plus x, and then we can just return the sum. Okay, and then we can just call in this function inside the main function. Okay, so you can say int x is equal to this function, and you give in, say suppose you want to find the sum of first 100 numbers. Okay, so you can just supply the number over here inside the function, and then you can just write sum of first 100 numbers, and then can concatenate it with the value. Okay, so now when you run your code, so it says that the sum of first 100 numbers is 50 Okay, similarly you can print the sum of first 200 numbers as well. Say you want to print the sum of 200 numbers, then you can simply call in this find sum function and can give the value as 200, and then can give sum of first 200 numbers is the value x. And when you run your code, so it says that the sum of 200 numbers is 20100. Okay, so it's like a factory in which we send something inside it, and then it gets the sum, it gets something out of it according to the logic we supply. Okay, so this is the functions. Now suppose I'll just tell you one more thing. I'll just make a new class known as utility functions. Okay, now what we will do inside it, I'll firstly make a main function. Okay, now what we will be actually doing right now, suppose I will just create a new function as public static void generate random number. Random number. Okay, and over here I give in any value. Okay, that is, it will return you the random number between 0 to that number that you will be actually giving inside this function. Okay, so what this function will do, this function will return you the number, say between, if you want to generate a random number between 1 to 100, then you can simply give the value as 100 over here. Any number less, then it will just simply return you the random number, any number less than that number, say 100. Okay, so suppose we call in this function over here inside the main function. Okay, and over here if we are giving the value as 55, then what will this function do? It will simply generate a random number lesser than 55 if you call in this generate random number function, right? So now for doing that, what you need to do is that in order to generate the random number, we will have to make use of the class random. Okay, so there is an inbuilt class called random inside C#, which will generate a random number, which will help us generate the random number. Okay, so I make an object of the random class, and then in order to generate the random number, you simply write r.next. Okay, and not, I'll just show you with this. Okay, and when you run your code, okay, I'll just so when we run our code over here, you will see that it generates a random number. It just generates a random integer number between any specified range. Since we have not specified any range, so it just generates a random number accordingly. Okay, so this is how you can just generate a random number with the help of the class random that is provided in build, that is there initially it is there inside the C#. Okay, so just try at your hand that just try the logic which will generate a random number between any number that you will be giving inside this function. Okay, say suppose like I told you, if you call in this function over here, generate random number, and you give any value, say 44, then what should this do? It should just print a random number between 0 to 44, that is lesser than 44. Okay, so just try to write the logic for this. You just need to make use of the random class, and then it will generate you the random number between any specified range as well. Okay, so this is how you can just generate a random number. Now I'll just tell you what is the practical usage of the functions in Selenium. For example, in Selenium we make a function like public static void do login, and then over here we will be giving in the username and the password. Okay, so this do login function will be accepting the username and the password to log you inside the application, and this function will be returning you the boolean type. The return type of this function will be boolean type. Okay, so what this function will do, it will obviously have the Selenium code inside it in order to log in inside your application. Okay, and then it would return you true if the login is successful, or it would return you false if the login is failure. If the login is a failure, then it will just return you false. Okay, so this function would be capable of logging you in logging any user into the application, this do login function. So similarly you can make many functions like in order to register a user to log out of the applications, right? So functions are very important while considering the programming language. Okay, so that's all for the second module in the second class. So tomorrow we'll discuss the module 3, the concept of oops. Fine.